Hey, good morning. You're tuned to member-supported National Public Radio, FM 89.3, KPCC, Pasadena, Los Angeles, Orange County, the home for classic American music Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. NPR News updates on the hour. I'm Freddie Johnson with you at 10:06. For the next hour, we visit with Steve Allen. He's here with us to talk about his latest Concord Jazz release, and we're going to listen to it as well. Titled Steve Plays Jazz Tonight, here's Steve's Blues, classic American music on KPCC. FM 89.3 KPCC, your home for classic American music from Steve Allen off his new Concord release. Steve plays jazz tonight. We just heard Tangerine, also Steve's Blues. He combines classic American standards with his own unique songwriting style and piano playing. Noel Coward describes Steve Allen as the most talented man in America. That's evident with 40 albums and 4,500 songs to his credit. And we take great pleasure in welcoming Steve Allen to KPCC this morning.
I take great pleasure in being here.
How are you?
I haven't awakened yet, so it's hard to say, but I must be good. I'm coming up out of it right now.
First of all, congratulations to you on such a fine record.
Oh, thank you. It was an honor to be able to play with these giants of jazz. Every other guy in the group is a true giant, and it's always more fun to play tennis with good players than beginners. So in this case, I was very comfortable riding along with them.
How did the concept for this album come about?
I honestly don't recall. I've done quite a number of albums over the years. I seem to knock off one about every 2 years these days. And we had been in touch with Carl Jefferson of the Concord label about some possibilities, and then I think it was finally Frank Capp, who plays drums on this set and has his own band. He mentioned something to Carl, and finally happened.
Uh-huh. The players are exceptional. Well, let's mention them. Of course, you on piano, Steve Allen, Ken Poplowski, clarinetist and tenor saxophone, Glenn Zatola on trumpet, Howard Alden on guitar, Chuck Berghofer on the bass, and, of course, Frankie Capp on the drums. It sounds like it was a lot of fun to record this record.
It really was that. It was one of those situations that just everything seemed to work. For example, I came into the studio with a list of about a dozen or so, mostly standards that I had planned to play, and we ended up doing only about 4 of those. What was happening was, after we'd listened to each take, I would just, while they were getting the tape ready for the next thing, I would just run over at random an old standard in my mind, and the guys would say, hey, that's a good one, why don't we do that? And what you're hearing on this is almost entirely first takes, and that's pretty unusual. I guess people who don't know much about the record business thinks everything they're hearing is a first take. But with some of the world's greatest musicians, they sometimes get up to take 8 or 9 or 10 before they find one they like good enough to release. So in this case, the stars, as we say, were with us, and it was an absolute delight.
Do you find it difficult to choose tunes for an album project like this?
No. Well, in a sense, I do. My problem is I can immediately think of 512 songs that should be included, so the difficulty comes in cutting it down to 12 or 15 or whatever you have room for. But I know almost all of the great songs written during the Golden Age, and to this day, that's the treasury to which even many young jazz musicians repair when they want to find the best stuff. This is not a matter of generational conflict, but all the knowledgeable young jazz people and the knowledgeable young arrangers and composers themselves, even though they may be pretty hot stuff and very comfortable with their own abilities, if you put the question to them directly, do you think you're as good a songwriter as George Gershwin or Jerome Kern, they'll say, oh, God, no, of course not. What a ridiculous question. It's like saying about today's president, are you as good as Abraham Lincoln? So really what we should be concerned about is quality. I don't care if a song is written next week or 100 years ago. If it's great, I love it, and if it's lousy, who should love it?
Right. Do you have any favorite composers?
Yes, again, I tend to think of more than one. If I had to narrow down to one, I guess I would specify Jerome Kern, partly because he was the first to do certain things harmonically back in the 20s and even before that. And he had an influence on all the others of that great school, the Hoagie Carmichaels and Cole Porter's, Irving Berlin's, Richard Rodgers, all those true giants of the art of the popular song. But who can not love Berlin, and who can not love all of them? They've all given us magnificent music. Oddly enough, the best songs of any of them are all pretty much on the same mountain peak level. So it's hard to say one is better than the other. They're all up there, and we should be happy they were on Earth.
Now, you mentioned earlier, we were talking in studio, that you had some gigs coming up. Will you be taking these guys out on the road?
I wish I could, but we're not a regular band, of course. In fact, I'd never had the pleasure of meeting Glenn Zatola, Howard Alden, or Ken Poplowski before. And brilliant as they are, I'm ashamed to admit that 8 or 9 months back, I hadn't even heard of them. If jazz were all I was doing for a living, I guess I would have known about their fine work, but I do about 14 things for a living. And I've been a jazz lover for half a century or more, and I know more than the average citizen does, but there's so many talented new people coming into the scene, and thank God for that. So I finally did find out about them, had the great good fortune to work with them in this instance. And I've done a number of jazz albums over the years, but this is clearly the best. I don't know whether I play any better now than I did before, but they certainly are standout, and they make the album really sparkle.
Well, Ken is a kick. We've had both Ken and Howard in studio. He must have been a lot of fun to be in a same room with.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons the thing went so comfortably. All of the guys had great senses of humor, and if you ever heard everything we said and did that night, it's almost like bits of a comedy album.
Right.
That does help. Humor helps in anything, in politics, marriage, hospital, whatever. It's nice to be able to laugh it up.
We all know you, of course, from your work in TV, radio, Broadway. How young were you when you became interested in music?
About 5 or 6, I guess. I always loved pretty songs. One of my happy memories from my childhood, and they were not all in that category, unfortunately, but one of the happiest involves traveling, I must have been 5, 6, or 7, in the late 20s, with my mother and whoever was her vaudeville partner of the moment, across country, and just singing. There were no car radios in those days, so we were providing our own music, and it was mostly the pretty ballads of that day. So I've always loved good music, and then a few years later I began to take piano lessons. Strangely, it didn't work. I had some difficulty in reading, with the sad result that eventually I forgot what tiny bit I'd learned, and I don't read music. I have to play by ear, compose by ear. So there was that negative side to it, but I've always been a music freak. And then, of course, in the 1930s, America was swept by the greatest popular music ever written, and the big band sound and jazz came on. Big band swing, all the ballads too, and the jazz sound, which means 74 different things itself, were the middle-of-the-road popular music of that period. So if you have to grow up any time in this century and want to end up with good taste musically, that was a great time to be able to do it.
Sure. Steve Allen joins us here on KPCC, your home for classic American music. Steve, did you have any piano heroes as a young guy?
As a young guy, my taste was totally square. I was only concerned with melody. I loved all the stardusts and the moonglows and all those pretty things. It wasn't until I was about 17 or so and got to a particular high school in Chicago called Hyde Park, where one of my new friends was Mel Torme, and I had some other guys who were musicians. They turned me on to jazz, not that they ever tried to, but when I would hang out with them and listen to records, they were playing Woody Herman, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Fletcher Henderson, all that, Benny Goodman, all that great stuff. And all you have to do is hear that, and if you have any sense at all, you dig it, So that's all there was to my getting turned toward jazz. And that early conditioning, plus the previous interest in melody, affected my work subsequently as a songwriter. There's something up in my head that cranks out songs literally in just a few seconds. I got up this morning about 5 o'clock and wrote about 9 melodies, and there was no strain to it. I've never had any difficulty writing a tune. It's as if there's an invisible radio in my head, and when I'm in that mysterious creative state, it just produces several pretty tunes for me. I usually write several at one time rather than one. So I've been very fortunate in my social and cultural conditioning during the years of my life.
So you get up in the morning and just sit at the keyboard and...
Not as a regular pattern. No, I never know when the state of mind is going to present itself. I just happened to awaken this morning, as I say, at about that time, and something just pulls me out of bed, and I'm like a zombie or a robot. I move half asleep down the hall to the piano and sit there and turn on the machine. Since, as I've mentioned, I can't read music, that means I can't put it on paper, at least in any notation that anyone else could interpret. So I just turn on the tape machine, and several new melodies generally come out in those moments. But there's no time pattern. Sometimes it's the middle of the night. All times of the day it happens.
Right. Steve plays jazz tonight, a brand new record on Concord Jazz, and Steve Allen joins us in studio here on KPCC. Let's get back to the record. We're going to hear something that you wrote, I Should Have Told You So. What inspired this melody?
Well, the melody came first. In fact, a chord came first. This is unusual in my writing. Sometimes I'll just be in my car and there's the song, sometimes even with a lyric, which is really mysterious. But in this instance, those interested in music, listen carefully to the very first chord I don't even know what the name of it is. It's a weird chord. So I simply developed that chord, and after I'd done that for about 8 bars, I realized I had already started to compose a theme, and the rest of it is development.
This is FM 89.3 KPCC, the home of classic American music, member-supported National Public Radio serving Southern California. Steve Allen and an original composition, I Should Have Told You So. Something else off the record, the one I love belongs to somebody else. The One I Love Belongs to Somebody Else. Classic American music from Steve Allen off his new disc on Concord. Steve plays jazz tonight. A little Errol Garner influence on?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I always do Earl with quotation marks, hoping that people who hear it won't think I'm copying him. I'm paying homage to him. He is, to this day, my favorite pianist. I'm not putting down Oscar Peterson or Paul Smith or any of the other greats, of whom there are dozens. But Earl had two qualities to his music that just touched me. One was an incredible romanticism on his ballads, of course, you hear that. And the other was a cuteness, an actual humor to his rhythmic playing. And then he had a third thing, just straight great jazz. You know, he could chops it up with anybody when he wanted to. But highly melodic in his jazz ideas. That's one of the reasons he was a fine composer. Most of the great jazz players have never been able to compose anything. It's not putting them down. It's like saying they never were lieutenant governor of Idaho. You know, just was outside their concern. But there are those jazz players who are highly melodic. I don't mean they stick to the melody that was originally the tune, but in their own playing they have that. That's why to this day the most influential of the boppers, to use that term, the late 40s, early 50 guys, is Charlie Parker. I'm sure you're familiar. You've played Super Sax albums on this station many times.
The Yardbird, Charlie Parker, sure.
Yeah, but what Super Sax does, as I guess most jazz fans know, is they take actual note-for-note Charlie Parker solos and then they voice them for 5 saxophones. And it not only swings, which is obvious, but it's melodic. You can slow it down and whistle it on the way out of the theater, as they say. And a lot of other great jazz players have not had that particular element to their playing. So to get back to Earl Garner, he always did. And there's never a note he played that I don't sometimes literally smile at or say to myself, yeah. When you hear something right, you sort of have a little meeting with yourself out there in the rowboat or whatever, and you agree with it. So I love his playing. But all of these guys on this thing, Glenn Zatola on trumpet, when you listen to Glenn play, to me, you're hearing the whole history of trumpet playing. I hear Bix, I hear Louis, I hear Charlie Shavers. Even he can throw in some Miles if you want that style. He can do anything. He's a true master of his instrument. He could be a great teacher of the horn in addition to a great practitioner of it. And Ken I must get a room tonight. Peplowski, who playing saxophone and clarinet on this, is as good as you can get on those two instruments. You can't ask any higher element of musicianship than these guys provided. All the rest, Howard and Chuck Berghofer and my good friend Frank Capp, it's all incredible stuff.
Let's talk about Frank Capp for a minute. Did he not indeed play drums in your studio band for many years?
Yeah, Frank has been my number one drummer. In fact, I don't even think I have a number two drummer now that I think of it. Yeah, we've worked together a lot, still do. In fact, I heard yesterday he might even go with me to Seattle, where I'm playing at the main jazz club up there called Jazz Alley. I think that's it. I played a lot of jazz clubs. Sometimes I get one name mixed up with another one. Anyway, he's just a fine drummer. He can do everything. He can show off when it's solo time, or he can make you feel like you're sitting in with the Basie band when he's just playing straight ahead big band support. So he's a real master drummer.
Did you ever play in jazz combos or big bands yourself?
You mean before I became the person on television?
Mm-hmm.
No. Well, I was too young, actually. I played with bands, but it was when I was in high school. I was playing with high school bands. As I said, Mel Torme was one of my fellow students at Hyde Park in Chicago. And after that, it was years of playing with neighborhood bands, sometimes dance bands, sometimes with some good jazz guys in the groups. And then later, when I lived in Arizona and Phoenix, same thing, local bands. And then when I was at Drake University in Iowa, Des Moines, for a year, same kind of thing there. In fact, I was there just last week getting an honorary degree from the old school, and I was telling somebody that about 20 years after I'd gone to Drake, I discovered that Roger Williams, who's, although not a jazz player, a very fine pianist, was there at the same time, and the puncher to the story is that neither of us ever heard of the other that year. Isn't that funny? He just happened to say that he'd gone to Drake. I said, oh, I did too. What year? And we were there at the same time, but never even heard of each other, much
wow.
less me. The answer is not too mysterious. It's that I was out playing with local dance bands on the same nights he was, and we obviously wouldn't both be playing piano in the same band.
Yeah. A quick change of topic. You got your start in radio. I'm curious The transition from music to radio, or just pretty much right into radio?
Well, yeah, there wasn't much of a transition there. Radio, as you know, is a field, as is television, or for that matter, motion pictures, come to think of it, in which you can do whatever you can do. You can, well, there's not too much of a demand for tap dancing in radio, I guess, although even that has been done. In fact, one of the dumb memories from my childhood, I come from an Irish culture in Chicago, and my family, I never dug it, but my family used to listen to the Irish Hour in Chicago, I think over station WCFL, and I don't think the producers were too hip. About 18 minutes of each hour consisted of dancing. Dancing on the radio, folks, think of it. So all you hear is a lot of, you know, people sound like they were dancing on a meat block or something. But anyway, the point is that whatever you can do, if you're a writer, a singer, whatever, you can do these things in these large mediums. So radio gave me my early training.
You made the move from radio to TV during the golden age, as they say.
Yeah, wasn't that lucky, too? Seriously, if I came along now, I might end up selling ties for a living. I don't know.
There's money in that, though.
Oh, you bet. Probably if you own the company, more than a lot of us have made in television. But in those days, we're talking now, let's take a round number, 1950, it was almost impossible not to get sucked in by the big vacuum that television was at that point. Now it's overstaffed and there's competition. But in those days, they suddenly had openings for 7,000 jobs and nobody with any experience at all. So they couldn't say, how long have you done television? There had been no television to do.
What is television?
Yeah,
right?
So a lot of us in radio just merged over. And first few years, as I say, if you walk by a station, somebody would come out and grab you and make you the program manager or whatever you wanted to be. So it was easy to get in those days.
What was happening in your life at that point?
Let's see, 1950. I was married, had 3 sons, was still very young. I was doing my own coast-to-coast comedy show with my then partner, a fellow named Wendell Noble, in 1946 and 47 on the Mutual Radio Network. And then I moved to New York, or CBS, I should say, ordered me more or less to move to New York to do network television for them in 50 and 51. But, and I was doing a lot of writing. My first books came out in the 1950s. So basically, it's just been a process of more of the same over the years. This next track and the CD features, again, chiefly Ken and Glenn. It's the old standard written by a man named Henry Creamer a million years ago called After You've Gone. It's a particular favorite with jazz players, and you can see why when you hear these giants doing it.
You're tuned to FM 89.3 KPCC, the home of classic American music. This morning we visit with Steve Allen, and we're listening to his latest album. It's called Steve Plays Jazz Tonight. It's on Concord Jazz, and a very pretty song right there.
If anybody listening can write prettier songs than that, please do so. Quick. We need them.
Haven Gillespie and J. Fred Coots, You Go to My Head. We also heard After You've Gone, featuring Howard Alden on guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, it must be a lot of fun to create music with such great musicians. It's obviously...
It's an honor. One of the reasons I enjoyed my years of doing talk shows on television, which I think totaled about 13, was that I had access to all the jazz giants. I should explain to young listeners, today there's not much of a connection between jazz and talk shows. There is, to a degree, on The Tonight Show, because they have a jazz group there, but you don't hear them much. And the kind of jazz they are playing, I think, is inaccessible to probably 90% of their listeners, or viewers. But in the old days, it was not that way. Since we were in New York, where either the great players either lived or worked a lot, they were all, right down the street. It wasn't see if you can look up Dizzy Gillespie. He was available if we called him. And therefore, they all, with the single strange exception of Charlie Parker, I never did understand why that was, but all the others were on the show at one time or another. Secondly, when we booked them, we didn't let them do the one number they'd be lucky enough to get now to do. We let them play 2, 3, or 4 tunes, and then sometimes for a finish, they'd roll a piano into the center stage, an extra piano, and I'd sit in. As a matter of fact, we have some great tracks available now simply because that happened. I was in an airport a year or two ago, and a guy recognized me and said, "Hey, I have your new album with Art Tatum." Now, to me, that was like saying, "I have a tape of your fight with Muhammad Ali." I couldn't make any sense out of it. I said, "Thank you, sir, but I'm not even qualified to have, and besides, he's dead," and so forth. He said, "Well, I got it," and it turned out he was right. Different people over the years were making what we call air checks, as you know, just recording off a television set of whatever was on the TV set. So there is an Art Tatum album which consists of 8 or 10 tracks of that sort, and in one of them he and I are playing Fine and Dandy at a very lively clip, but it sounds good. Certainly his half does, and I'm not ashamed of my half. And we also have a track with Earl Garner and myself after he had done 4 or 5 tunes of his own. In those days, we would give these giants 20 minutes, not the 3 minutes they'd be lucky to get now. So that was one of the great kicks of being, it was like having a party. Wouldn't you love to have a party tonight and say, "Get me, whatever, Elvis back from the grave," or whoever you would dig at the party? Well, I had that kind of ability when I was hosting those shows.
We heard You Go to My Head, Ken Poplowski, with a very Lester Young-like tenor sax approach.
Yeah, that's exactly what I asked him to do, and he can do anything on that horn, so he did that.
You were inducted into the TV Hall of Fame in '86. Do you have any plans to do more television in the future?
Well, entertainers, by and large, do not really have much plans. We're more comparable as regards employment to electricians, painters, plumbers. We're in the yellow pages. And fortunately, I do work a lot, but mostly it's in live concerts now. I'm a guest on other people's programs, but not doing a regular series. There is a possibility at the moment, which, like all possibilities, might or might not happen. And if it does, wham, I'll be back on television. But you never know until, your number comes up.
Right. Steve, you were here for an hour, and we're out of time already. It's just gone by in a blink of an eye.
That's true. I've tried not to blink for the whole hour, but my eyes got dry, and I had to put coffee in them. Hey, it's been great being with you. I listened to you a lot. I was listening, in fact, the day you had Howard Alden and Ken as your guests, and it was terrific radio. Congratulations on that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Steve Allen on KPCC, and we thank him for coming down, making a little time out of his day, and coming and joining us here on KPCC, your home for classic American music. This is FM 89.3. Pasadena, Los Angeles, Orange County, member-supported National Public Radio, and the home of classic American music, Monday through Friday from 9 to 3 with NPR News on the hour.
3 magic words will change your life. Your social life, anyway. Stuck for the perfect way to do the town, make a splash, twist the night away? 3 magic words are your ticket to Southern California's hottest concerts, your guide to great late-night spots, your insight into the world's most interesting performers. Too much work for 3 little words? You haven't heard them yet. Wednesday Music Magazine. This is Matt Wright. Let me, Renee Engel, and a list of all-star guests work our magic on you Wednesday night from 8 to 10 on KPCC.
Hi, I'm Cameron Sanders of Marketplace. Area codes can only cope with so many phone numbers. As cities become more populated with more telephones, fax machines, and modems, the phone company must assign new area codes. Trouble is, there aren't any area codes left to assign. That story and the rest of the news affecting your pocketbook later today on Marketplace.
Marketplace from American Public Radio, made possible by GE, every weekday at 3 on KPCC.
You know, you can spend a sunny Memorial Day weekend enjoying music and old-fashioned fun. It's the 20th annual Topanga Days Country Fair. Rock and roll, country music, arts and crafts, food, and zany contests all weekend long. For information, call the Topanga Community Women's Club at area code 310-310-455-1980. Classic American music continuing on FM 89.3, KPCC, Pasadena, Los Angeles, Orange County. This is your member-supported national public radio station.